So you want to learn how to draw lips in Procreate. Chances are if you clicked on this video you're struggling with drawing lips, and so did I for so many years. I found them the most difficult feature of the face to draw, and now I feel like they're the thing I actually draw best. So fear not, I'm going to show you my entire process from beginning to end, talk about it and show you what I do to get end results just like this. So we're going to be working on the bottom left today. Let's go. Pinterest is a goldmine for references. A lot of the photography on there is very aesthetic and pretty, and you can even search by skin tone. So get on there and find a beautiful photo to draw from. I'll link the one I used today in the description below so you can draw from it too. Let's get into painting. Okay, so you can see my reference in the corner here. The first thing I do is create a new layer. Just ignore the fact I never name them. I always know which layer is which, but I would name them if you're forgetful. And then I do some trial and error with a medium hard airbrush to find the skin tone. I was happy with this one, even though it wasn't an exact match. I thought it contrasted well enough against the white to use. So then I sketch after I've laid down my background color or skin tone color, whichever it is, depending on the reference. Your initial sketch is important because it does set the tone for the rest of your work, so you do want to get it as accurate as you can. Mine is never perfectly accurate. It's too hard to copy absolutely directly from the reference. I don't want to do photorealism. I like to do my art with my own style, but you do want it to be anatomically correct. So this line in the middle is never going to be just straight between a pair of lips. That's one mistake I used to make. So just try and recreate the photo as accurately as you can, because it's really going to make things easier later and you won't have to clean up as much. With lips, just make sure you're paying attention to kind of the fleshy parts and the actual shape of the bottom and the top lip, but doesn't have to look super 3D because we will be airbrushing in those shadows later on. Alright, the easiest part, the flat colors. So I usually go with a medium hard airbrush and I try and pick a color which I feel like represents the lips as a whole. And what I mean by that is something that is suitable for shadows to go on and lights to go on. You can also adjust it anytime. Just make sure you make a separate layer for this and put it under the original pencil sketch that you did, but over the initial skin that you did, so you can edit it quickly and easily later if you need to. Then comes a new layer for airbrushing. So I start off with my shadows. My airbrushing, I won't lie, is a very chaotic process. I usually have about 3 or 4 layers of airbrushing in total by the end, which I then merge when I want to use the blender tool. But one rule of thumb is I always start off with shadows. So if you look at the reference, you can see these shadows on the top lip, at the bottom of the top lip, right where the lips meet. You want to recreate those first, then you want to look at the sides of the bottom lips. And then you also want to pay attention to how some shadows are darker than others. So for example, the shadows at the top lip are actually darker or slightly darker than those on the bottom lip. But of course, everything can be edited. So if you do something wrong, you can go back and change it. And here you can see I made a new airbrush layer where I thought the lips weren't looking as vibrant as they should. So I added in a bit more color. And I play with some lights here. Now I have a separate subsection in this video about highlights, but that's mostly talking about the gloss on the lips. But here I'm just highlighting parts of the lips which are lighter. It's also good to turn on and off the original sketch lines just so they don't distract you, because you can't clearly see the edges of the lips under those. So make sure you're turning those on and off. Another tip for airbrushing is to play with the opacity as well, and make sure you're zooming in to get that precision, but also don't stay there for the whole time. You want to zoom out and think, okay, does that look right? You want to be able to kind of squint your eyes and think, does that look correct? Or does that shadow look in a weird place? Or does that highlight look in a weird place? Because these things, I can't remember whose video it was, but I saw an artist's video a long time ago, and he said, these things aren't going to fix themselves. You need to fix them. and if you don't, your work is going to look off or unfinished. So make sure you pay attention to parts which seem unblended or in a strange place, and make sure you do fix them. But you can easily blend using a less opaque airbrush next to the opaque, say, highlight you've done, for example. Or you can use the eraser tool at a very low opacity to erase some of the airbrush if it's looking unblended. This is my favorite part. This is where I really start to see the lips come together. So this is where I'm going to do the glossy bits. Now, it's not simply just white. Here I picked a very, 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 very light pink, and then I tried it, and you can see I actually turned down the opacity because I still thought it was too light. Again, I don't try and exactly mimic the colours of the reference because I don't want to spend all day on this. I'm not being a perfectionist here. I just want to create something that looks anatomically correct, convincing, and pretty. So I'm happy with this colour, but also with these things, you also do want to pay attention to the fact that these lights, these little dapples of light, or reflections of light, are all different colours. So you can see, I mean, you'll see me do it in a minute anyway, but if you look at the reference, the kind of highlights in the centre at the Cupid's bow are a completely different colour to the ones that I first drew on the lips. And that's what's really going to make your picture pop and make your artwork look very interesting and convincing. You can also zoom into your reference and pay attention to the teeny tiny little shapes that all of these reflections have, which is what I was doing, and I just went for it really. You can always warp things as well or delete them if they don't look right, but just make sure you're zooming in to get that precision and zooming out to make sure that it looks okay. And for this, I believe I used the syrup pen, and I used it at not the full opacity, but I kept changing it up and down depending on how light or less light, I suppose, these little reflections were. And now I have something that looks relatively convincing. I still don't think it's perfect. I still didn't think it was bright enough, so I made a new layer over everything where I used a more vibrant pigment with the airbrush nozzle and the opacity on very low. And then I used the eraser a lot to clean up around the edges, so to try and make some of the edges less harsh. A favourite little trick of mine is to use an eraser with a low opacity to gently kind of remove harsh edges like you can see me doing here. I love that trick. As you can see, I think it worked quite well. Also adding in some final highlights and shadows until I'm happy with the shape overall. I keep zooming out and looking at it, you know, just to check with the reference. But again, I'm not trying to exactly replicate the reference, like point for point. I want to just make it look nice and pretty and my style, and use the reference to help me create art like that. Anyways, so then I played around with the shadows that go behind the lip. So I did this by making a layer between the very bottom layer of the lip and the skin. The colours I had used initially were a bit too dark, so I tried out with a less dark colour, and I actually really like how it came out. And you also want to make sure your shadows are more muted, okay? You want to be more grey kind of range, or taupe, or like a very grey brown, but not completely grey. And these are the final results. So you can see a couple of my other studies I've done there, but I'm actually most happy with this one out of all of them. I hope you learned something today. I hope my tips and tricks that I shared with you will help you in developing your own art. And I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it entertaining. You can find me on socials at Faye's Little Nook. Share with me in the comments if you use this in your own artwork, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!